America, I'm Star Parker. It is one of the unfortunate ironies coming out of the Biden administration that with all of their obsession about so-called equity, policies that they're putting forth are really going to hurt the very low-income Americans that they pretend they want to help. The Biden administration is growing government at a record pace. Oh, they pretend that they want opportunity for every American, but their bigger, more intrusive government policies achieve the opposite. Bookshelves are sagging with evidence that big and intrusive government stifles economic growth. Last month, the Biden administration submitted its first 10-year budget to Congress. The budget projects an average annual income or economic growth at 1.9%. This is the economic growth at 1.9%. This is their number after they've done all of their lavish stimulus spending for this year and next year. If you're wondering why I'm shaking my head, because what does 1.9% growth really mean? Well, according to the economist, John Cochrane, he's at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, from 1950 to 2000, the U.S. economy grew at 3.5% per year. And interestingly, average real income over that period grew from $16,000 per person to $50,000 per person. Cochrane, he then supposed that if growth were only 2%, a little bit higher than their 1.9%, as a projection over the 10 years, $16,000 income would have grown over that 50-year period to only $23,000 rather than to $50,000. You know, not too many other than geeks and eggheads and economists think about economic growth or government budgets, but we should, especially if we're concerned about personal incomes and what's left over after our taxes are paid. We should also be concerned what's going to be available for our children, our grandchildren, and what debt they're going to have to pay. So to get a clear picture into how the Biden administration's budget will slow economic growth, there are a variety of credible indexes that we can look to for the measurements. Cochrane always points to the Doing Business report from the World Bank. It measures the difficulties in starting a business, running a business, but there are other indexes. There are more general ones, like one that looks at economic freedom. One's from Fraser Institution in Canada, another's from Heritage Institution here in Washington, D.C., and they look at the size of government, regulation, taxation. But interestingly, they all point in the same direction. More government means lower incomes and slower growth. At least the Biden administration and his economists are being honest to project anemic economic growth that will accompany their big, huge growth in government. Biden's COVID relief plan already had a $1.9 trillion price tag. With that, we have this child tax credit for children under 17. It was expanded, and this week, the IRS and the Treasury are starting to send out payments to almost 60 million children that are eligible under their plan. The one payment totaling $15 billion, and it's going to happen every month. Not all of you are going to get that. You're going to just get your $300 per child, $250 the second one. Wow, this is really good. Free money, free money, free money. No, you know what? It's tax dollars, and those tax dollars accumulate from a lot of people. It's taken from one and given to another. These tax dollars sent to Washington only to have politicians decide how to spend it. They want to spend it on who they want, and most of these ways don't make any kind of sense, and it's so inconsistent with the scripture. We'll talk about that a little later. At a time when we have historic drops in our fertility rates and marriage rates, how come the Biden administration somehow thinks that, contrary to experience, massive new government spending and entitlement programs will be a boost to the American family? Many well-established economists and scholars have called this massive expansion of government entitlements the largest expansion since Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society. You know, one such economist notes that for the first time in U.S. history, more than half of working-age households in America will be on the entitlement rolls. Now, this is crazy. I'm not sure that you want to be on welfare. I've lived on welfare. I'm not sure that we all want to live on welfare. And I think we should be concerned about this. With a $28 trillion debt, our economy will not be sustainable. We cannot keep spending at this rate and giving money away. That's why we've called in one of the top economists in the country, our friend Steve Moore. He has to help us sort through this craziness. It is really crazy. He has to help us understand how this impacts you, You have to understand how this impacts your children, your grandchildren. Steve is one of the founders of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. He's a Heritage Foundation economist, and he formerly wrote on the economy and public policy for the Wall Street Journal. He was an economic advisor to the Trump administration and a national leader. He's just been doing quite a few things here in Washington, D.C., including he founded the Club for Growth. So let's get some insight from him. Let's also get some insight from our distinguished panel to help us sort through the noise of the news to find some truth. So onward into this discussion about Biden's big government disaster, and we'll get into that right after this message.
It's time for a cure. CURE is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the CURE, the Center for Urban Renewal and Education. Headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
I told you I have a very, very incredible friend, an amazing economist, mine, Steve Moore. And Steve, thank you.
Hi, Star. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you again, too. Has a regular blog that you really need to get because if you want to stimulate your mind on some of these ideas and economic thoughts, you need to follow this every single day, the Committee to Unleash Prosperity,
it's free.
which is what we want. Well, it is free. And I'm surprised it's free because you're like a libertarian thinker. You don't like free stuff. But anyway, I want to talk to you, okay? Biden's budget, that big disaster budget, in layman's terms, what should we be thinking about? What should be our biggest concern with what we've seen over the last 6 months of what the left is doing in this financial area, the economy, and then what should we be thinking about to protect our interests?
So it's the bankrupting of America is what is going on. I mean, we're looking at trillions and trillions of dollars of debt that I never thought I'd see in this country. Joe Biden's budget calls for $20 trillion of new debt over the next decade. Now, Star, I believe
20 trillion?
20 trillion, with the T, trillion.
Of new debt.
Of new debt. Of new debt. The spending is going to be about $50 trillion. And, these numbers are so gigantic that it's hard for people to fathom. But here's the problem. If you look at just every child born today is going to be, it's like you're handing them a $300,000 mortgage, a debt to pay for all the spending that we're doing. And it's getting worse and worse every day. And, I really worry about my kids and my grandkids and what we're leaving them. And a great country doesn't do this. It would be one thing, look, when we had this terrible pandemic, it was certainly appropriate to borrow to get through this terrible year that we had. But it's over. We have the vaccine. It's fantastic. American economy is back up and running. We got businesses going again.
And resilient.
We don't need
the economy works. We know that. Markets work.
We don't need to be spending
yes.
trillions. Now, here's the thing. Americans, we're all Americans. We love free things, right? If the government's going to give us free things, oh yeah, give us more and more and more. They're passing out checks now, another $3,000 per child. They're doing,
and attaching it straight to their bank account. It was really interesting.
Yeah,
with attaching it right into their account.
Free money.
We're having discussions about voter integrity and voting rights and people pretending they can't even get an ID, but yet somehow the Biden administration is able to get into everybody's bank account and leave this money there. But go ahead to your point that now 3,000
plus they're going to get free health care, plus food stamps, plus free rental assistance. You can't be evicted. All of this stuff is going to be free. And you know what I'm thinking? Why are people working anymore?
Right.
I mean, it's not fair to the people who are working.
That's right.
We did a study at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity that we found a family of 4 with 2 parents, if neither of them are working, both collecting unemployment benefits, and then they've got 2 kids, they can be collecting benefits from the government, tax-free, of $100,000 a year.
Wow.
And why would people work if you can get more money?
Well, they're slowing down work. What we're seeing is what we know happened in our inner cities, in our poor communities. They're expanding that welfare state. Nothing there worked, but yet now they're expanding.
Well, you've called it sort of the plantation mentality.
It is.
And it really is. You're sucking people into becoming dependent. Somebody asked me, are they intentionally trying to get people dependent on government?
That's the question.
I'd almost ask it to you. I don't know if this is intentional, But, you know, the worst thing you can do to people, my mom used to say, she was a wise woman, never do something for someone they can do for themselves.
That's right. Well, she was very wise.
Right? I mean,
you know, very wise. But to the intention, I mean, Lyndon Baines Johnson is on record that if we expand the Great Society and welfare program and get people addicted to government, then they're going to be dependent on us as Democrats forever. We know that.
That was their strategy.
So that was a strategy. Yeah. So I'm not going to pretend we don't know that there are ill intentions.
But to what end? Has it been good for Black America? Has it been good for Hispanic Americans?
No, it has not.
Dependency on government. Look, there is dignity, and there's a sense of purpose, and there's a reason to get up in the morning if you have a job.
Right.
You know, to sit on the couch and watch Netflix, and I have friends that are doing that now.
That's right, because now it's expanded out into the majority
the middle class.
So this is what I want to go. Let's focus on what you said about that 300,000 debt that we're passing to our children per child. And especially now that we know that childbearing rates have fallen, we as a society are collapsing right in front of our own eyes. But let's break that down, because obviously there are people in our society who don't believe it, because they're allowing for this administration to get away with it. They keep electing these liberals to office knowing that the progressive agenda is a part of the liberal agenda, the Democrat agenda, and so we're seeing much more government and fewer people than involved in stabilized traditional living patterns. So what does that mean when you say 300,000? We know that someone's not going to get a bill one day for $300,000.
Well, how does it work? Think about it this way. You have a credit card. I have a credit card. Everybody watching the show has a credit card. Imagine if all of a sudden you looked at your credit card and said you owe the bank $300,000. That's what it means. I mean, these debts have to be repaid. But people do look at that, and in fact, a lot of people are finding out when they buy a house, they're like, "Hey, how come I have to pay so much?" Yeah, exactly.
Well, because you borrowed at that rate. Right. Of course you owe it. But people, I'm wondering then, did something break down in culture to where people don't think that they actually owe that credit card?
Yes.
Because that's an interesting example. Right. A lot of people live off credit card, and they think one day, if I die before that balance was paid off, oh well. They're not even connected.
Well, let me give you another example. You know, we did this thing with these eviction moratoriums, and you know, basically saying you don't have to pay your rent. Right. And I have friends who own apartment buildings, and I asked him what happened, and he said, as soon as the government said, hey, they can't evict you, everybody stopped paying the rent. Now,
well, not all people.
Not everybody, but a lot of people.
But okay, so now you're getting to a moral
How is that fair to the person who actually owns that building?
That's right.
Because now he can't pay the mortgage.
That's right.
Then he can't pay the bank.
And now the bank.
This idea. Look, if somebody.
Okay, so is it that people don't put those dots together?
I know. And by the way, everybody says we have an affordable housing problem in America. Right. We do. Why would anybody build a new apartment building if people don't have to pay the rent, right? I mean, so this is the thing that liberals don't think. They can't. You said connect the dots. They're very bad at connecting the dots.
But they are. But how about the population? Have we gotten to the place to where the general population is so disconnected from their role that it's just every man for himself? Have we crossed that line of no return to where now everybody's just not paying the rent? You know, one of our regular panelists, and he'll be with us, Jonathan Alexandre, said, married people pay mortgages, single people pay rent.
Right.
Is that where we are now? That where people, and now they're not even going to pay the rent, and we don't even think about who owns that building that now can't pay that. Wow. There's such an attack, I guess I'm saying, on capitalism, on free markets, on the wealthy that we're disconnected to where we don't know that that's a person.
The free enterprise system is the goose that lays the golden eggs. Everything that we have, look, you can only have government giving out money. Let me put it like this. The only way the government can give me $100 is to take $100 away from you. Right? I mean, there's not like manna from heaven. So all they're doing is basically taking money from productive people, the people who are working, and give it to the people who aren't. I think the thing that's unfair, and the heroes of our economy right now, if you think about the last year and a half, the heroes have been people working in nursing homes, the people who are the nurses, the people, the delivery people, the truck drivers, the people in the grocery stores, you know, the people who've worked in the restaurants. They're working 40, 50 hours a week. Right. And then how is that fair? Liberals love to talk about fairness. How is it fair they're getting less money than the person sitting on the couch, Star? I mean, that makes crazy.
It is crazy. But then what, we're not seeing an uprising from them. Is it because now
people are angry about it. I think people who are working and they see, think about this. You work 40, 50 hours a week. You get up 6 in the morning. You do your job. You go home. The guy next door is watching TV and he's making more money from the government off of your paycheck. I mean, it's unfair. B, it's bad for the country. country, it's bad for the families. The data shows very clearly that when you're unemployed for a long time, the longer you stay unemployed, the worse it is for you and your family, even if the government's giving you the money. So we're not doing a favor for people by giving them all this free stuff.
And I think that they're starting to recognize maybe we're not doing a favor. I mean, there has to be a place that we can move towards solutions. I'm going to talk to our panel about some of these things, especially, you brought up so much. There's a breakdown in culture because now we have a whole lot more singles, adults who seem to just say, well, whatever. And then we have a lot of people getting frustrated because they are doing their part. And then we have an administration that is spending incredible. We have to somehow reverse this, and especially with some of the things he just laid on the table.
I know we're out of time, so I'll just say.
No, I'm going to bring it back after my panel.
Okay.
So
But three thoughts.
Yeah.
The young people today are less patriotic, they're less pro-family, less likely to get married, and they are less religious. And the loss of religion, family, and work, I think, are crumbling the building blocks of our economy. I don't know if you agree with that.
I agree 100%. That's why after, I'm going to talk to my panel about that and those three things exactly, but I want to talk to you again after the panel because you're in Washington, you're working, you're an economist, you even worked with the Trump administration to try to correct some of these things.
We did.
You worked with
had
everybody.
A lot of success, and
so
especially for Black and Hispanic
We're
Americans.
going to talk about that. And after my panel, so I'll be right back, and then you'll hear more from Steve right after this message. Well, I hope you fall in love with my roller coaster guest, Steve Moore. He's, yes, one of my favorite economists and friends, but we need to unpack a lot of what he said. So we're going to do that with our panel. Of course, I have Jonathan Alexandre with me. Jonathan, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Star.
That's a big commitment for you to be here with us every week. Are you enjoying this?
Of course, I enjoy the conversation and trying to come up with solutions that'll help save America, change the trajectory that we're on.
Yeah. And I hear from a lot of our audience, and they're really starting to say, you guys are delivering in a way that I can understand it, I can explain it to my children, so they appreciate it, so I appreciate you. And as you know, he's the Senior Counsel of Government Affairs for Liberty Counsel Action. And in fact, when he got here today, he had a question from one of our staffers to say, I think we're having a little problem here. My boss wants to force me to take the vaccine, so we're taking advantage of his time as a constitutional attorney as well. I have another really special friend with me. I haven't seen Peter Roff in quite some time.
How are you?
I think I've seen you on a few television shows, though, because you do a lot of TV.
Yeah, I do. And thank you. It's the first time on your show, and I'm really glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you
and
are.
I've had both my shots.
You have?
Yes, I have.
Oh, I didn't know you had to have 2 shots.
2 Moderna shots.
Oh, Moderna shots. Okay.
It was great. It was fine. Everybody should get one.
I thought you were talking about shots like as in, shooting a gun.
Oh, no.
I didn't.
I don't talk about that in public. But as far as the vaccine's concerned, I think the vaccine is a marvelous example of how the free market system can respond to a national crisis quickly. More quickly than government, solve a problem that government could not solve. And I just want to encourage everybody who hasn't been vaccinated to get vaccinated.
It's interesting you say that, and that's not what the show's about, but President Trump is not getting enough credit for what he really did to unleash the burdens and regulations of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Peter Roff is a contributor editor for Newsweek. You can tell he's very, very opinionated because his opinions and works in it full time and has for quite some time. So we really appreciate that. And then Diane Roth, you a PhD economist as well, adjunct and professor, George Washington University. I saw you nodding because you agree with the market and getting rid of these regulations and all the extension of government.
I really do, yes. But it was very smart of President Trump to buy 30 million doses of 5 vaccines before they were approved.
Wow.
So that once they were approved, the companies could start rolling them out and the government could start rolling them out. And that's why the United States is ahead of most other countries, except for the UK and Israel, certainly ahead of Europe, Latin America, Africa, in getting our vaccines out.
Because he ordered before?
He purchased 30 million doses of 5 vaccines before they were approved.
Oh my.
So once they were approved, then we could start rolling them out right away. The government could start rolling them out right away and getting them to the senior citizens who needed them the most.
Oh my goodness, what a way to start this panel, because that is the incredible mind of an entrepreneur, the brilliance that a businessman brings to the table, brought it into government, tried to do what he could here. We're in a dilemma right now because we're looking at a new president who thinks the of all of our lives. Government plays such a significant role in all of our lives that they just passed 1.8 trillion. Now we got a budget, another few trillion. Now we're looking at a family plan, 3.5 trillion. These trillions are rolling out so fast and so far that people don't even know how to calculate it, so they're not thinking about it for their personal lives. So maybe, Diane, I'm gonna start with you to say, you said it so well, and I'm so glad you reminded us that there's a free market and a private sector that can do a whole lot that we might not be paying as much attention to as they're rolling out these $1 trillion package of government taking care of our lives. Could you speak into that?
Exactly, Star. They want to roll out another 4.1 trillion, which they're going to have to pay for somehow. It's going to come out of your taxes. It's going to come out of everyone's taxes, and it's going to stop small business from doing what they do best, which is selling products to the rest of us Americans. Plus, the inflation rate right now, it was announced that it was 5 or 6%, about 5.9%. That's much too high. That whittles away everyone's paychecks.
You know, you worked in Treasury, and I hope you guys appreciate what Diana's saying to us, because you know how money works. You know how the economy works. And so now you've said, okay, these are the tax dollars. This is what they're doing. But you brought up something really interesting about the impact on that small businessman, that person that's saying, but I want to start. They were already so hit hard by COVID.
Right.
Are they going to be able to, what's happening now? This inflation is going to affect us more significantly, isn't it?
The economy is roaring ahead, but the inflation is also rising. And what the Federal Reserve should do is cut back on some of the measures that it rightly took during the recession and say, look, the economy is supposed to grow 7% this year. So we don't need all the monetary and fiscal stimulus that we had before. And in terms of the monetary stimulus, which is the role of the Federal Reserve, they don't have to be buying all those mortgage-backed securities, all the treasury bonds. They don't have to be keeping interest rates so low. They should be concerned about inflation, because some of us remember the 1970s and all that double-digit inflation that they then had to get out during the 80s. We don't need that.
We don't need that, and a lot of people are not remembering. And Peter, I know that you have looked at these issues over your career life. You've studied them. You've talked about them quite a bit. And now we have an administration that I'm not sure that they're going to make those kind of decisions, because they seem to be so focused on government can do this. There's a progressivism that's pushing half of the country to say, we don't want to think about the things that Diana just brought up. So how do we unpack that? How do we get people to say, no, my life is my own?
The first thing people need to understand is that the progressives lie about the class struggle, about rich versus poor. The top 1% of income earners pay 90% of federal taxes.
The top 1% pay 90%.
90% of
the rich will take care of the bill. The rich will take care of the bill. I don't know if it's that high, but go ahead.
About 90%. The bottom 50% of earners in this country pay nothing in income taxes. They pay Social Security tax, they pay Medicare, Medicaid tax, they pay the Obama healthcare tax, but they don't pay income taxes. So it's people like the four of us who are in the broadly defined middle class who carry the financial burden for most of the federal government.
Okay.
And so when Mr. Biden talks about borrowing money that has to be paid back, about creating new programs that grow in the amount of money they spend each year without Congress being able to affect it. These are called entitlement programs. You and I and Diana and Jonathan and the people who are watching are the ones who are going to have to pay for that. There is no such thing as a free lunch, even though Mr. Biden, Mrs. Harris, and the rest of the administration are trying to explain to everybody, we can give you free health care, we can drive the minimum wage up. The best example that we have is the impact that the unemployment bonus had on the workforce. COVID was bad, but the lockdown of the economy is what is responsible for the loss of jobs, business closures, all the things that ensued. Because Congress decided to give people extra money on their unemployment benefits, once the economy began to open up, people weren't going back to work because I could make more sitting at home, either doing nothing or getting cash from side hustles that I'm not reporting as income.
You know, it's interesting, Jonathan, because we've talked many times about the breakdown of tradition, the breakdown of religion, and the role it played, the breakdown then of family, to where you didn't get to just sit around and buy a lie that it's somebody else is going to pick up the tab for you, so you can kind of just sit around. Is that why this administration's getting away with some of the languaging and some of the packaging to force everybody to buy into an idea that obviously our kids and grandkids can't pay?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's a moral consideration. Our moral compass is so skewed now that we're not taking the work responsibility that is originally given to mankind to work and to keep and to be able to be stewards and produce. Our familial structures are broken down, and so the incentive and the accountability that you have within a marriage household, within a family of, well, we have to provide for our kids, we have to have food on the table, that's completely broken down. And our religion compass is broken down as well, where we have no moral outlook on, well, God's not in this proper role in our household. And government says, no, well, I can be in that role. And government, as often as you give them the leash of taking more and more control, is as often as they will take that control. And this recent, the stimulus packages that we've seen through COVID and the budget plan that we're seeing from Biden is all an indication of government saying that if you create a void in religion, I'll come in and fill that void.
And it has, and it will. And now what we've already thought we had confined just to our most distressed zip codes, and we see that problem there. We even mentioned a little bit about what's happening in Cuba with our guest interview. We're now it's expanded to the middle class. I mean, when did $150,000 become poverty level to be able to get a check in your bank account? But then I saw you kind of when Peter mentioned the numbers. I'm not, because I was kind of questioning whether 1% pay 90% as well. I think it's actually, a little bit.
I believe it's the top 50% pay 95% of the individual income taxes, and the bottom 50% pay 5% of the individual income taxes. And I don't have at the top of my fingers how much the top 1% pay, but it's a substantial.
It's a substantial amount. Thank you for correct, because I when he said 90, I'm like, I don't think it's quite 90, and I know how we can. When you're quoting numbers, it gets to me. Wait, did I really say that right? And so yeah, that's what you got phones for. You can go and look and see, get the numbers exactly right. But the point is, you can't go on like this, can we?
The point is that any tax increases affect a lot of people, and they make our economy run more slowly, and we don't need more tax increases. Plus, we don't need the programs that President Biden wants us to have for the $4.1 billion.
Gosh.
I mean, we don't need to expand Medicare. A lot of people don't like being on Medicare anyway.
They want to do that. They said, well, let's bring the age down to 60. Since we couldn't get socialized medicine their way, let's just keep bringing the age down.
We don't want universal pre-K. We saw that these schools stopped working during the pandemic, and the kids had to stay home, but the private and charter schools were still open. So we don't need more government-provided universal pre-K.
Let's stay there for 1 second. I'm going to do a whole show on that, and I want you to help come back on that one. But there we have, 70-80% of Americans that want daycare already get it. We don't need a government system, is what I'm hearing you say, and do the same thing you did with the other schools. But go ahead.
We don't need government-provided paid family leave. These businesses work it out as part of the compensation package. We already have the 12 weeks mandatory unpaid family and medical leave.
Which hurts small businesses.
It hurts small businesses, and moms work it out.
They do. When they have that opportunity. Oh, I'm going to run out of time here, but those are three major areas that I know that we're going to do individual shows on alone, because
we don't need federal child care. We don't need free. If we have free community college, then there's no thought about whether you sign up for Community College Star. You can just sign up and then drop out of a program, which is really expensive for the community college and for you.
It's endless. So Peter, what we have to do, I'm gonna I want to talk to Steve about some solutions into some of this, but I want to, and then I want you guys to come back after. We're gonna unpack it one little issue at a time. But what are you seeing, and where can we push back on this? What does 1.9% growth mean? They're telling us that, hey guys, don't even expect the economy to grow because we're not gonna let it.
Well, the economy was growing under President Trump. The economy is growing now under President Biden. The difference is that if you think about a bush in front of your home or in a park, President Trump took a bush and made it bigger, and then different governors came in and hacked that bush way down to where it was almost at the ground level. And it's now started to grow again, no thanks to Mr. Biden, but Mr. Biden is claiming credit for the growth.
Right.
We are not back to
the
where we
governors
were.
in the different states
That's right.
basically
like
said,
Governor Newsom in
California.
California, Governor Whitmer in Michigan, Governor Cuomo in New York.
Right.
Mr. Biden is claiming credit for a natural process.
That
And
happened in
economics
the
is a
states that
the
they
free
were-
market
yeah.
is a natural, organic kind of thing, like a bush. It's growing in spite of what Biden is doing. It's not close to where it was
Well,
under
it's
Mr.
not,
Trump.
but they're projecting that. We don't expect it to grow much at all, and we're going to do everything we can to get more people dependent on government, and then we'll confiscate from the little 1% that we pretend have a lot of the money. And then, Jonathan, after our break, and we come back with Steve, I want to ask you about the impact of family, the impact of religion. We really need to get into this and some of the things that we can do, and we're going to get to get ourselves out of this, and we're going to get to that right after I talk to our special guest, Steve. He's the economist that's going to help us look at some of the solutions, and I'm going to ask my panel about those solution ideas right after this. I'm so glad this show is called Cure America, because we have an opportunity to try to talk about some of the solutions to the problems you just heard about. It's dark out there, but there's light. And so I kept Steve to address some of the light part of it, what we need to do to be saved, to solve some of these problems. He is the founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. He was at Club for Growth, Heritage, writes for Wall Street Journal. I've just been, we've known each other years and years, but I'm also a follower. We've worked together, and I think we're going to work together on some new projects, because we've got to get ourselves out of this mess somehow. We can't wait until we're in glory and then our grandkids are saying, what a mess, or our great-grandkids are doing what they have to do in Cuba right now. There's got to be some solutions before we get to communism.
By the way, Cuba, people should be the media is not paying attention to this. I mean, if you want to see what socialism and communism can do, look at Cuba. I mean, Cuba once was a very rich country. If they had a free enterprise system and they had freedom in Cuba, it would be like the Hong Kong of the Western Hemisphere. And instead, people don't have enough food to eat. Yeah. I mean, so if you want to see front and center what happens when you move towards socialism, look at the tragedy of Cuba.
Right.
It's really
let's not go over that, Clifton.
Yeah.
Let's not let our children, grandchildren,
No.
and great-grandchildren be in that position.
Yes.
So what do we need to do?
So I think if I could wave a wand and do three things to improve American families, American economy, more jobs, and more wealth for America. Number one, I love remember Steve Forbes' idea of flat tax. Make it really simple. Everybody pays 19%. I don't care if you're Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, you're going to pay that rate, and you're not going to have all these, special interest loopholes.
Or the janitor.
And then everybody. But you don't. You pay up to the poverty level, and I mean,
kind of like the tithe.
Yes, exactly.
Everybody does 10%. You make $10,000,
that would be
you do
so great for the
1,000.
economy.
You make $100,000, you do the $10,000.
That's number one.
Go ahead.
Number two, I believe every single parent in America should be able to send their kids to whatever the school they want to.
I know.
I mean, it's just such an obvious thing.
So
and the
obvious.
teachers' unions are strangling our kids. They have shown over the last year and a half they don't care about the kids. They don't care about the parents. They care about a liberal ideology, and they were responsible for shutting down our schools, which I think was one of the biggest mistakes we've made in our country's history. Yeah. Well, it was child abuse. It was a national case of child abuse.
We
Get
did
the schools open and let parents, I'm working with the mostly African-American parents here in Washington, D.C., because Joe Biden wants to kill the voucher plan again.
Yeah, again.
It's almost, why?
Obama came in to kill it because freedom,
it's all minorities.
We know, we talked about it on the first panel. It's controlling the mind.
Imagine
you
if we
control
could,
the mind, you control the individual. If the individual mind is open up to learn and get more reading and they get more understanding, they live free. We know their side is not about freedom, but you just said something I want to bring a point, because we talked about this on Cure America last week about the schools, and I was just amazed about the map and seeing how many, when I started this stuff, we didn't have any school choice anywhere, and then we saw
we're moving
Milwaukee.
in the right direction.
It is almost the whole country now.
Yeah.
So you're right, we're moving to the right direction.
But there are a lot
what
of
happened last year,
parents
still
don't have that. And
I know.
just down the street from where we are right now, some of these schools are just tragically bad.
I know.
And my kids, two kids, my wife's two boys go to Catholic school. They're not even Catholic, but they have discipline. they will,
Oh, that's
turn you
what
out.
we see in the urban centers.
That's
that
what's
every
needed.
time that the parent gets choice, even if she's a crackhead and she gets choice, she sends her kid to a Catholic school because she's like, I really want to. I don't want him like me. I want to break that cycle. I really want him to learn and grow. I think that there's something in everyone that really wants to be free. So let's move on to the work part.
One other thing before we leave this, because I'm your economist. Hold on.
Okay, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
We're paying, most people have no idea how much they're paying for the government schools, but in D.C., it's about $25,000 per kid.
$25,000.
Now, imagine
per
we
child
said to
in
imagine we said to these parents, single parents, or, that if you have an income, let's say less than $100,000, we're going to let you have say a $20,000 voucher, and you can go to Georgetown Prep, you can go to a Catholic school, you can go to Jewish school, you can go to a black school, you can go to Montessori school, you can go to a music school. Every kid is different. That's the other thing, Star. I mean, I have 5 boys. Every one of them is different. The idea that we warehouse them, let's let the parents decide. I think that would be a revolution in our education system.
Are any of them going to be the economists out of the 5? Or are they really different?
Sorry?
Your 5 boys, or any of them the economists?
They don't want to be economists like me.
Okay, so parents.
They want to make money.
Okay. You're funny. Okay, so you're talking about how to do it, and then they want to actually do it. Okay, so let's move to do it. What is another thing? You said the magic wand.
The other one, the third one. So the first one is the flat tax, a simple system. The second is school choice for all kids. And the third one is something you and I have worked on for 30 years, which is move to a personal account system for Social Security. Let every single young person in America, black, brown, red, white, take 10% of their paycheck, every paycheck, and instead of sending it into Washington, the black hole, put that into a personal account. You put it into what's called an index fund. It's just an index of all the stocks, and let them just hold on to that money for 30 or 40 years. And think about this, every single black family in America would be millionaire. If they were able to put that money there.
Oh,
they'd have so much more money.
I remember when we first met and we were
People
working
get
on
screwed
this.
by Social
It was
Security.
so bad. And in fact, I took my mom as an example to see who ended up, before she went to eternity, at $700 a month from the IRS in her little Social Security check. And when I looked at when she started working, what she would have had instead of $700,
$5,000.
Oh my gosh! And I would have such an amazing inheritance that I wouldn't be able. I wouldn't have to work. And now I'm in the age I have to go back on welfare because it's a forced program. We know that. Were you a part of that? I know YAS had done. They were looking at doing a way to personalize Social Security. I think your name was a part of that.
Yeah, we did it. We did it
Explain
together.
that to me,
and we
'cause it's been a
basically would
couple years since I
guarantee
looked
you
at
can
that.
do no worse than Social Security. So the idea would be, okay, so let's say Social Security, I'm just picking a number, $1,000 a month. We're going to guarantee you're going to have at least $1,000, but you can make maybe way more than that. Your mother would probably have like $5,000. Yeah, because you're going to have the power of compounding the interest over for 45 years of working. You're talking. I mean, the Dow Jones was at 1,000 35 years ago. It's at 35,000 today. It went up 35-fold.
I know.
Every single person.
Everyone
would be a millionaire today.
But there's such a messaging from the left to disdain.
Yeah, but you know what?
wealthy.
Here's what I'd say. If you don't want to do it, you can stay in the system.
Then stay in the system.
If you want this alternative, we're going to let you make money. I bet people would be lining up the door.
Let me ask you this. Of course I do, and that's why it's still a project in Cure Policy, and we're looking forward to working with you on that. But here's what I want to ask you before we run out of time, is do you think that based on what we were talking about with the Biden budget, with leaving our grandchildren $300,000 a day, do you think that now's the time to have a public discussion about moving ourselves from depending on the IRS in retirement to a personal IRA? Is
never better.
Never
I mean,
better.
look, these are I don't agree with Joe Biden's policies, okay? But this is America. We don't have socialism in our DNA. I think there's a revolt going on against this big government. Don't you? I mean, I feel it.
We definitely see it in the schools because the critical race
but
theory
now
was
you're
actually,
seeing
that was a tipping point. Everybody said, no, never.
So I think
but now on this
we're
one,
be good.
are they feeling the pain enough yet that we can now say that third tier, because it's going to take a while to get to a flat tax or some type, or rethink the income tax system. But what about Social Security? Is this the time?
I think the time is now. I mean, let's not wait another single day.
Yeah.
Every day that we don't do this, people aren't getting and especially for the young people, if you're under the age of 30, the Social Security is the worst investment you're going to make.
The word, and especially for the brothers, they lose 20 cents on a dollar and being forced into that system that they
and by the way, that
system
system's going bankrupt too.
It is way bankrupt. But I'm wondering though, okay, because now when we started working in this, a lot of talk about the transition call, what happens to the seniors. We're now, 30 years later, have a baby boom generation that has had some inheritance. They see how money works a little bit more. So I'm agreeing with you that this is the proper time. What's the step? I got 1 minute. What do we need to do first to get us to where we can go?
Really get active on this and say, we want the opportunity to be able to invest the money ourselves rather than send it to Washington. And people have to realize you could make 3, 4, 5 times more money. But for people, because I know you have a lot of people watching the show that are senior citizens, we're not taking away your Social Security. We're going to guarantee you're going to get your. We're talking about your kids and your grandkids. They will have a system that will provide them an even benefit. Everyone wins.
Everybody
It's
wins.
the power of markets.
It's a power of markets, and I've said so many times, if you own Wall Street, you don't want to burn down Wall Street. I think
That's
that
a
one
great
of the
point,
most
too.
beautiful things
Everybody would own a piece of the rock.
Everybody owns a piece of the rock, and then you don't have these little fractions that say, we don't feel like we're American. We will all then be proud of the
The
flag.
average,
because
I just saw, I know we're
unified.
out of time, but the average African American has less than $5,000 in savings.
I
That's
know.
ridiculous.
I've looked at all the numbers.
If they had
bad.
private accounts, Social Security, they wouldn't have
We'd
$5,000. They'd have $500,000.
One generation to
Exactly.
transfer wealth, and all of this
Oh yeah,
race
and by the way,
goes away.
if you die, you can take that money in your account and you can leave it to your kids. You can't do that under Social Security. If you die, the government just laughs and say, good, we got all this money from Martha and she doesn't even get any benefit from it, right?
Oh, but we're the government, we thought. Steve, thank you.
Okay.
And thanks for those 3 points because I'm excited about it, and I'm going to ask my panel about it right after this message.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education, headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
Incredible ideas that we've been discussing here in Washington for quite some time on the tax thing, the flat tax. I think we should talk about that one, but many agree that we shouldn't have this income tax system that we have today on school options, and you're going to hear a lot about that on this show particularly, because that is one of the cures. And then on Social Security, reforming it to a personal system, I like that. So now I want my panel to talk about it with us because I love that idea. Jonathan Alexandre is still with us, Peter Roff, a contributor editor at Newsweek magazine, and Diana Furchgott-Roth, a PhD and an adjunct professor of economics at George Washington University. It's a mouthful, but you were telling me about even in that Biden, they're getting the climate, they're getting everything. But I want to, before I come back to you, Diana, I want to ask Jonathan about the religion and the family breakdown component of it, because if you don't have a social structure intact where you know why you believe what you believe to make good decisions, we can get into trying to do taxation and school options and personalizing Social Security all day long. But if you don't know what to do with your personal decisions in life, or any of these things even going to work?
I think the point that Diane was making on the different programs that Biden is suggesting, whether it's universal child care, having community college paid for, or even these climate initiatives, Biden's couching all that under the term human infrastructure, basically saying we're going to build up human beings. And that should be an awful, scary thought for anyone that's paying attention to scripture, paying attention to religion, saying that the government is now in the practice of building human beings. It's not at all the role of government. It's, it's the family, it's morality, it's the church that surrounds an individual and literally builds them up. That's what the church is there to do. But of course, if we excise that from our community, if we're getting rid of God from culture, then the government's going to step right in and say, no, we can build up individuals. And to the worst point of it, they're saying, well, we're going to take your tax dollars, your hard-earned money, and we're going to use that to build individuals. And folks,
but people still haven't even believed that. They're not even buying. How are we so disconnected from we're paying for this? You know, Peter mentioned in our last segment as a panel that this is falling on the back of the middle class, but I don't see a middle class uprising. Is it because we're too used to living off of our net income and we don't think about gross at all?
And I think it usually, unfortunately, takes a crisis for individuals to realize that, and what inflation is government just artificially pumping money in. And that sounds good because government can pay for their bills in the interim, but then when you start seeing your individual price of bread go up, when you start seeing the price of milk go up, when it's harder to feed your children, harder to get from point A to point B, then you realize, oh, this is actually affecting my individual pocketbook. And even if you're getting raised, even if you're giving universal tax credit to individuals with children, that money's not worth the paper that it's printed on because of these things.
Well, we've gotten a little away from where people are calculating that, but you're right, they're starting to feel the pain, but there are places where they actually create the crises, because Diana, we were talking a little bit about this climate change that's in there. You listed some of the things that are in this package when people think about, whoa, that's a lot, and you got a 10-year plan, guys, and here's what I'm going to do to take over your life and build your human capacity. But even climate, that one, they're creating a crisis. Come on.
They're creating a crisis, but the United States is only responsible for 13% of global carbon emissions.
Wow.
So even if we got rid of all our carbon, which would be really expensive for us, it wouldn't solve any global warming problem because most of it is coming from India, China, and developing countries, and they are not cutting back on theirs.
Right.
They
and they're probably not going to cut back on theirs.
And I'm wondering
how much can government force people to do? Peter, what's happening right now in Cuba? We're looking at people that you can only keep them depressed and suppressed for so long. 60 years of this madness. They still can't feed their children. They're the most beautiful island in one of the most beautiful islands in the world, and now they're like, maybe we should have enough of this.
Yeah, they're waving American flags in the Cuba demonstrations while the American flag is being stomped on, torn, and burned here in the United States by people who don't recognize how valuable the right just to wave the American flag is. Now, before we get to that, I did misspeak in the earlier segment. In fact, the top 1% of income earners pay more in taxes than the bottom 90%. So the principle is correct. I got confused on the numbers.
Or the actual numbers.
But where we are,
so the top 1% are paying their fair share, if not more.
They are absolutely, although when you talk about flat tax, fair share means everybody pays the same percentage of their income, whether it's 12%, 18%, 26%. Everybody pays the same.
God said 10%.
I agree with you.
I have questions about the flat tax I don't know. Next you know it's 25%.
God says 10. God says a minimum of 10. Government should get 9. I think that's rendering under Caesar plenty.
Yeah.
But what you're also talking about is a multi-decade-long campaign by progressives inspired by Marx, who saw religion as the opiate of the masses, to eliminate authority figures.
Is that what he said?
Religion is the opiate of the masses. It keeps them drugged. It keeps them from recognizing the reality of the world.
Okay, so go ahead.
To destroy authority figures other than representatives of the state. They've gone after the church. They have gone after civic leaders. They have gone after important institutions because they want the only authority to be the government, the only authority to be the state, and then the state's going to come along, and the supposedly smart people like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are going to make all of the decisions for everybody else. And I don't think that's what God meant when he announced in Genesis that we have free will.
That's right.
That we have the ability to choose between good and evil, which is why we have good and evil, so we can make that choice. And in so many places, the government is impeding on our ability to make a choice, whether it's a choice of how I grow my business, who I hire in my business. in China, how many children I have in my family.
Well, here too, I mean, Planned Parenthood has done an amazing job.
Where I send my kids to school.
Yeah, well, that's what I want to talk about. Let's talk a little bit about
There are some worthwhile rules that government puts in place. For example, we should be tough on crime. We should respect other people's property. Those are rules and laws. And one reason there's so much investment in the United States is because we respect property rights and we don't take other people's things away.
Right.
So
to a certain extent, because they go in our pocketbook and take our money from us.
Government does it. But government does it with impunity. And they have all kinds of rules that you can't fight back. You can't sue. But Diane is exactly right. That is the rule of law.
We have our lawyer here.
Right, and that's where Scripture comes in, right? Romans 13 gives the right of government to punish the evildoer, keep constrained evil, and so there are good applications of government for sure. But what we're seeing is the vast expansion of this idea of what our governing rules should be, and all the problems that we're discussing comes from that absolute breakdown. And anytime you replace Scripture from it, you no longer have the principle of what a good investment is. You don't have the idea of casting your bread upon the water because you'll get a return for it. You're not teaching that. You're not teaching morality. And so, of course, when government says they can come in and step in and define how we're going to use your own money, we'll just go along with it.
So then are we seeing a little bit of the revolt? Can we get to a place where or we have those school options that Steve talked about? We'll have a continuous debate about tax structure. Maybe we can have more debate about it now that Biden is saying, hey, your whole check belongs to me. Others might start saying, are there any other options? And then I want to spend some time even on personalizing Social Security. At what point do we get people to say, I can live free, and in a free country, I want to live free, and now we need to move toward living free? You got any thoughts on what we need to do next, or can we do these things?
Absolutely. And in fact, the Social Security system is very unfair to blacks because on average they have shorter life expectancy, so they get less out of the Social Security system.
They can't pass it. So
a system where everybody could take 3 percentage points of their Social Security contributions and put it into a private account.
3%? Steve said 10%.
Well, it would be great, but President Bush...
But you said, let's start at least a little bit. Okay, but go ahead.
President George W. Bush couldn't even get 3 percentage points passed.
I worked on that initiative. But see, I actually thought we should have started with a smaller group. That maybe 30 years and 30,000 and under, and build out a pilot program before you try to do the whole thing. But I couldn't convince them. I was too little to convince them. We didn't get anything.
It's important to remember, though, that freedom works. Yeah. Personal freedom works. Freedom in the marketplace works. And people are now talking about equity, which is equal outcomes, rather than equality, which is equal opportunity. And a government that is strong enough to guarantee equity is a government that's strong enough to keep everybody down. Not lift them up, but keep everybody down. Wow. And as we've seen in Cuba, as we have seen throughout the parts of Venezuela, all the parts of the world that has experimented with socialism, what inevitably happens is a small group of elite people who live very well keep the vast majority of everybody else down, often by using police powers. Yeah. Well, they keep their foot on the neck of the people.
Well, we're seeing that now, that even though, you know, they keep saying we want to defund police, they're really looking to nationalize them from Washington. So we're a little bit ahead of where Cuba went to then have to, for their grandchildren, say enough of this. Jonathan, can we, they keep bringing up the brothers. You guys, it is a challenge. Sorry. 20 cents on the dollar, you're losing because black men die younger and work lower wage over their life. And there's nothing to transfer, so they keep using us. So now that the left is bringing up this word equity, which is an economic term, can we break through that door that they've opened, change the subject to personalizing Social Security so money goes to IRAs instead of to the IRS?
Absolutely, and the solutions are found by going back, right? Some of our best solutions are found even in the Constitution itself. African Americans the freeing of slaves through the 13th and 14th Amendment is where we got this public debt clause in the Constitution. And if you look at that clause in the Constitution, it says that government always has to make good on their debts. So individuals now can say, well, the government's, has bonds that I can go out and buy. They're going to be backed by the federal government, treasury bonds, as was mentioned before, ways that I can even invest in the federal government if I want my money to go there, that I'll get a return on in 20 years.
Or the marketplace. It almost sounds like you're saying, well, hey, you guys want reparations? Here it is.
We'll take full
Personalized
advantage
Social
of it.
Security. Just take our, what is it now? 6.4 from the employer, 6.4
For the social welfare,
and so you're at 3%. Steve is at 10%.
Well, no,
Maybe we can do a little bit in the middle.
No, I said 3 percentage points.
Oh, percentage points. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
yes,
So
yes,
10.
yes.
Yeah.
He was talking to percentages, and you were talking to points.
Exactly.
But I think the concept is good, though. We're going to get into the weeds of the numbers and what it looks like. Is it time for folks to actually say, we want to sever this relationship between us and government? They have it from, and want to expand it now to the womb to tomb. They want to now go from K to 12, which they've already ruined our kids there, down to 0 or 2 years old. And they already get us on the other end to have to go back on welfare to force you into Medicare and Social Security. Is this time for that to be the discussion and the revolt? We only have a minute. Who's raised their hand?
I was going to say, definitely, one thing we do, a starting point, cut out any public expenditure that's not articulated in the Constitution. So if it's not in Article 1, Section 8, which is simple defending our nation, physically defending our nation, and general welfare, how we'll redefine what that actually means. If it's not written in the Constitution, then we don't pay for it. And that cuts out everything that the New Deal created, that cuts out everything that COVID stimulus, and certainly will cut out, if it's constitutionally
I have so run out of time
anything
on
that is coming out of the Biden plan.
And I'm glad you ended on the Biden plan. Then maybe it is just time to revolt against that. If we get enough energy to say no, we start. You mentioned, Peter, what's happening in the states. The states are saying, we're pruning back and we're going to grow. Dan, you keep us focused on the economy and that how important that is. So I'm leaving this conversation encouraged that there is already movement toward these ideas of freedom. Can you guys agree that we can keep that going and maybe come back and join me another time?
Right, and we need to elect more congressmen that are going to vote for lower bills and not vote for such high spending.
Comes back down to you. The one thing we still do have is open and free elections. You play your part. And here in Washington, we can do our part and maybe have a free society. I have some final thoughts for you after this message.
It's time for a cure. Cure is a coalition of new voices with new ideas that will become new policies. We are the Cure. The Center for Urban Renewal and Education, headquartered in Washington, D.C., CURE works with churches, political, and business leaders on behalf of urban communities. CURE's mission is to address issues of culture, race, and poverty from a Judeo-Christian perspective. CURE. Join with us. There has never been a better time to help Black communities.
A lot of insight, a lot of information. I'm so glad that we have opportunity to listen over and over and over again. Just some brilliant minds on our panel, brilliant mind in Steve. And with all of the division and disagreement today, there is no disagreement about the shame that the vile institution of slavery was once present and legal in America. We all agree it was a blot. We didn't talk about it on this show, but this is what's driving a lot of the left today, to pretend that this is so systemic in our society that we have to expand government because the way that it's distributed now is so unfair. We all agree that racism is deplorable. But we also must agree that the reason slavery and racism are terrible, and we're very terrible, is that every human being must live with dignity and in freedom. So knowing this, how can anyone think that the remedy and antidote to slavery and racism is putting all Americans on a government plantation? Not only is this thinking immoral, it doesn't work. I know it doesn't work. I know what it's like to live on a government plantation. I told you guys about my story. I've written my story. I have 2 books that tell my story about my life in and out of welfare dependency. Some Americans may get checks in the mail from the government and say, great, I got free money. But it's not free. It comes at a cost. It comes at a cost to slavery to the state. And if government can give it to you, they can take it away from you. And what's also interesting, it comes with a cost of covetousness. That 10th commandment says don't covet. And for government to go into one person's pocket and take it from them to give it to somebody else is just inconsistent with Scripture. Government is supposed to be about protecting, not confiscating our life, our liberty, and our property. So those of us who really want every child in America, of every background, every ethnicity, and of every income level to realize his or her potential, we should continue to strive for their dignity. We should continue to strive for their freedom by making sure they grow up in a free country. I'm Star Parker, and I'll see you next week on Cure America.